Welcome to another edition of Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. We start every episode the same way, with a saying of the day. You're probably going to learn something here, so listen up.
Saying of the day is don't stumble into tables and chairs that are not in the room. And so many times we worry about things. We get all worked up and they don't come through. Or if they do, they're not as bad as we thought. So don't spend your time or waste your time worrying about things that aren't there. And that's one of my favorite. Don't stumble into tables that aren't there.
That's a good one.
It is.
It's a good one. You can drive yourself crazy worrying about things that aren't going to happen.
That aren't going to happen. Let's talk about several things. I always like to work in Stupid Criminal of the Day pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
A guy in Wisconsin, the police saw him at a mall and recognized his van, and he had been chased earlier in the day. So they start trying to pull him over, and he runs again, and they finally get him stopped, and it takes 3 cop cars. And he jumps out, and they jump out, and he jumps in one of the cop cars, and away he goes. So he stole a cop car, and they got him again. He stole another one. He stole 2 cop cars in one day.
Wow.
That's a busy man. And, you talking about stupid criminals. I mean, he's very stupid. But if you want to steal something, don't steal a cop's car. But especially if you're going to try to get 2 of them in one day. He was working overtime, to say the least. And he had a bunch of warrants out for his arrest. And that's the reason he said he was running, because he had warrants out for his arrest, and he knew that they were going to put him in jail for a while, which they did. And the fact that he stole 2 cop cars didn't help his case at all.
No, it just made it worse.
Made it a lot worse. There was another case where a Chicago man, he's 67 years old, and he got arrested for impersonating a policeman. And he got arrested twice on that in the 90s. And then he got arrested the other day. But this is the great thing about it. His name was Robert Ellis, and Robert shows up to court to represent himself. You know, he said he told him he is a police officer and things like that, and he won.
Oh, he won.
He won, and the judge found for him. He lived in some little town outside of Chicago, and they'd given him a badge and made him a deputy to help out on weekends or whatever. But been arrested 3 times for it, and he represents himself. And usually if you represent yourself, people say you got a fool for a client. Mm-hmm. And Abraham Lincoln said that. And that, if you've got a legal problem, you need somebody that can be objective about it. But he was good and convinced them that he really was a police officer and really did have a badge that, but the badge was not much, evidently, but it's enough the judge let him go. And he didn't try it in front of a jury, and I would have been afraid to try it in front of a judge. And I think he probably didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. And he got lucky and got the right judge that looked at it.
Now, he is definitely the exception to the rule when it comes to representing yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a good idea.
You don't want to do that, and causes all kinds of problems. And every once in a while, there'll be somebody in a major criminal case represent themselves, refuse counsel. And the judges will always put somebody with them to try to tell them what to do and what not to do. But they usually don't.
The guy that was just convicted in Florida for attempting to assassinate President Trump, he represented himself.
He did, and he got lied. I could have told him, and that the court wasn't happy with him anyway, and that judges don't like that because it takes too much time, and they just mess things up. They don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Makes it tough. We had a guy that set a Guinness Book World Record Super Bowl yesterday. And this guy, Brian Fowler, he is a Raiders fan. And the Oakland Raiders, the L.A. Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders. But he was a big fan of the Raiders. And so over a period of 72 and a half days, a little over that, he went to every football stadium in the NFL for a game. And this season, he saw 56 games.
Wow.
He was a busy guy.
Yeah.
Going to every stadium. I've always, on my to-do list, I've always wanted to go to the Green Bay for a game. And I tried last year, and the only time I could get tickets was November. And I don't want to go to Green Bay in November. Maybe September. Maybe October. But I don't want to be there in November or December.
If you do go, it's worth the time and the money to take the tour of the stadium before the game. It's really cool. I was there for a first game of the year a few years ago, and I believe that was in September. And it's worth the tour. It's fun.
Everyone says it's a big deal. But you know, the NFL, I'm a big college football fan, and I have not seen an NFL game throughout the game other than Super Bowls in the last probably 5 years.
Really?
I just don't, I'm not a fan of the of watching NFL all the way through a game. And I think their numbers down some. They had Bad Bunny. I'd never heard of Bad Bunny. Show you how up I'm on
Chancellor,
things.
you're not alone.
Somebody told me, "But what do you think about Bad Bunny?" And I said, "Bad Bunny." I'd never heard of Bad Bunny. I'd heard of Bugs Bunny. And I said, "You talking about Bugs Bunny?" No, Mad Bunny, Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny was Mad Bunny when he was getting his Grammy, and he gave his acceptance speech in Spanish. And so a lot of people got upset about it, about him being on there, and some didn't and everything, and I don't care. I won't, I'm not going to watch halftime anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I moved past that. But the NFL got into a deal that they got to be woke, and are still traveling down that path, and the public's not with them. It's kind of like Budweiser. They tried to make sure their ads were a lot better, and they weren't running ads on transgender, which that's still one of the craziest to see. No matter how big you may be and powerful you may be, you can make some mistakes, just like Coca-Cola. They were setting records. And all of a sudden they decided, well, let's change it. Mm-hmm. If it's working and you're making money, don't change it. And they had to change back real fast.
Kind of goes back to something you touched on once before. They were definitely not thinking of their people that own share owners of their company when they do things like that.
When the HR people and the communication people will get you in trouble if you're not careful, because in HR and communication, it's kind of a different aspect of the business. And so they may go to some conference and everybody say, boy, this is a big deal. You need to have ads on this, something. They go back and get to working on it. And the guy that's delivering beer to the bar is the guy you need to talk to. Mm-hmm. What the fans saying. And so that's important. Also in Pennsylvania last week, had a woman got trapped in a car wash and was there for over an hour before the firefighters could get her out. And her name was Felicia Sullivan, and she documented it and put it on TikTok and Instagram. And she got out safely, but they were the manager, according to the police and the firemen that were there, said the manager gave her gift cards, and they said things like, "Please don't sue us." So he was thinking in the right direction. Washington Post, bad times. They laid off half their reporters, and they're going to close down after the Olympics, after the Super Bowl. They're going to close down the sports department. So they'll probably use Sports AP or something like that, and just won't have it. There's a lot of people, a lot of newspapers. I I think with Texas Tech alums, a lot of them will take the Lubbock newspaper to get the writings on what's happening with Texas Tech or, something like that. And the Redskins, which are now the Commodores, have been popular people. Commanders.
Yeah.
People get to change these names, and I have to make an adjustment. And they, they had a big following. They've got a loyal following in Washington, just like Baltimore does. I still want every once in a while say Baltimore Colts. Nobody knows who you're talking about. Back when Johnny Unitas was great. There was a guy from Louisville, and nobody wanted him. He wasn't any good, and he was too slow, and he didn't have right form, but he could put the ball right between the numbers on every player. He was good. Sonny Jurgensen passed away, and he was a great quarterback from the University of Georgia and played at Washington and for the Commanders. And I apologize to all the Commodore fans that I call them the Commodores, but they'll answer to something. The Commanders, and that's unfortunate that they had those. John Riggins was another one, passed away. Riggins is the one that was seated next. I don't know who made the decision on this, but to put John Riggins next to Sandra Day O'Connor when she got on Supreme Court at some kind of banquet. And he said, loosen up, Sandy. And he got tired. Somebody spoke a little long, and he, was about to fall out of his chair, so he just got down on the floor and slept for a while. He was an unusual guy from the University of Kansas. And he had his own drummer. A study came out on binge drinking. Binge drinking. All reports now, they talk about your stomach, about your gut, about, it used to be heart disease, but they trace it to what's happening in your stomach. And they said binge drinking will cause you problems, according to this new research. And they said one episode of binge drinking, and an episode would be, if you're a woman, you're drinking 4 drinks in 2 hours. If you're a man, you're drinking 5 drinks in 2 hours. That's one every 30 minutes for a woman, and probably not going to do her any good. But they say that it causes inflammation of the gut, of the lining, and it starts a domino effect that causes further damage to the stomach. And short bouts of binge drink can trigger the inflammation and weaken the gut barrier. And so moderation is the key. And remember, binge drinking, if you drink 5, if you're a guy, 5 in 2 hours, that's called binge drinking. I thought binge drinking was, according to the definition I'd always heard, somebody just got drunk and they were chugging them fast as they could. And, they were freshmen in college, and it was their first time away from home, and they'd gone to a church that didn't let them drink grape juice, so they were kind of wild about it. Here's a survey came out, and I don't believe parts of it. They're talking about Americans having struggling time paying the bills and everything, and food prices are up. I was at the grocery store the other day, and they had a roast. It wasn't a big roast. It was $33. I was talking to the guy, and I said, the last guy that robbed me had a gun instead of a roast. He didn't laugh. But they say half of Americans are struggling to pay their bills on time and afford groceries. And 78% say they believe everything, the costs are up in the last year. And we're in a cost of living crisis. Now, the part that I don't believe was that they had a deal where they said that 38% of the population in the United States has moved because the jobs weren't paying enough. 38%, that's 40% of the population. There's not enough U-Haul trucks in the world. Somebody's off on that one or wanting to change what people think. And it was a survey of 5,000 adults across the country, split evenly by state and generation. And 9 in 10, 87%, believe the U.S. is in a crisis of cost crisis of living, and that 52% are struggling paying their bills on time. And I know at apartment complexes they have late charges, and late charges at all the things I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years have been higher. They're making more money off of them, but that doesn't help them in the long run. But saying that 38% of the people move, you know, you don't have enough money to move. And so I don't believe that 38% of the population, that would be 40% of 300, would be 120. You're talking about 130 million people moving in the last year. That's a lot of moving, you know. So, somebody got carried away in that. Someone wanted the survey to show things that led to their beliefs. And always watch on surveys that if they word the question right, they can come out with what they want. And they had some issues in the state legislature last year, and both sides ran polls showing that everybody agrees with them, you know, both sides of the issue. And that doesn't happen at all. In California, we had a new hearing on the congressional makeup, and California changed the law, and a 3-judge panel upheld it and said it was not made on basis of race. It was made basis on political parties. It's politics. And so that they think California will pick up 5 seats. They didn't have many Democrats, didn't have many Republicans to start with. So if Republicans lose 5, they're going to be in single digits. And the Republicans picking up 5 in Texas. So it may turn out to be a wash. That Newsom was saying, well, Governor Newsom was claiming, well, Trump started this fight and then lost it. Won't know whether somebody lost it or won it until the elections this fall. We were talking about a little earlier, Ryan Roth. He got life in prison. He was setting up in the bushes to shoot the president when he was playing golf. And he got life, and that happened in September of 24. And it was right after the president got wounded in Pennsylvania, and this guy was setting that up. And that he, asked the judge for leniency instead of life. The lawyer that was trying to help him asked for 20 years instead of life, and the judge, didn't agree with that. There's been so much talk about what all's been happening in Minnesota for the last year. It's just terrible that anyone loses their life. But I think back the 2 that were killed by ICE agents and George Floyd, who years before was, if they'd done what the policeman told them to do, they'd still be alive. All 3 of them be alive today. So, if the policeman tells you to do something, you do it. And if they're wrong, you can sue later, and you can go to court, and they can go to court, and you'll have books and lawyers, and nobody gets killed. But when there's a police stop, and I've said this before, the number one thing is everybody should go home. And that should be the number one thing that happens each time. Tom Homan has really been put in charge of what's happening. And he's withdrawn 700 agents, immigration agents, and they're pulling them out. And part of the reason is because local jails and local enforcement are working with the federal people on criminals, trying to find criminals that are illegal aliens and get them out. And not even the Democrats. If somebody's in jail for murder, well, should you deport them? Yes. Might make them want to serve the sentence and then deport them. But they're trying to work with some of the local officials, and maybe that will work. There's a lot of turmoil out there over those issues, and that ICE agents are not happy about being targeted like they have been. Last nuclear arms race agreement ended last week. So the big deal is, are we going to do a new one? And Secretary Rubio, the Secretary of State, says that if we're going to do a new one, we need to have China involved. That China is one of the three major suppliers of nuclear weapons now. And that if we're going to negotiate something, we need to have China involved as well. And I don't know whether that will happen or not, but China's had a large growth in their stockpile of nuclear weapons. And that's going to be something that'll be very interesting to see. Trump won't really get involved in this until it gets to a certain point, and then he's going to say whatever. It's just like on Greenland, he wanted more bases. We've needed more bases. And that then he talked about, we could take it if we had to, and he pointed out that he wasn't going to invade. But they finally sat down and they worked out got everything he wanted, and Denmark got what they wanted, and it's a dead issue, and they're moving on. And the last poll I want to mention is a consumer magazine came out with the top vehicles for 2026. And the Honda Civic was best for small cars. I've told this before, but the Honda, the guy told me one time the Honda was the first automobile mentioned in the Bible. And I said, why? Doesn't make sense. And he said, yeah. Said the Honda Accord. Said Jesus and the disciples left in one accord. But the Honda Civic is the best selling and best driving, according to Consumer Reports. Mid-size was Toyota Camry, and best small pickup was Ford Maverick. I've never even heard of a Ford Maverick. But the best pickup overall in sales and Consumer Report was the Ford F-150. And I think everybody's got two or three. In Lubbock, Amarillo, everybody's got two or three of those, it seems like. And the Consumer Report, they buy 50 new vehicles and test them, and then they make their recommendations. But the Honda Civic, $24,000, and Toyota Camry was $29,000. And the best compact SUV was Subaru, was $27,000. And the best mid-size SUV was Toyota Grand Highlander, $41,000. And best luxury compact was a Lexus NX, $44,000. Those go up pretty steep. And if you get in the best luxury mid-size SUV, you get a BMW at $67,000. BMWs are made in Germany, and it's not as hot in Germany as it is in Texas. And I found that there were some, 10, 15 years ago, their air conditioning wasn't as good as I would have preferred. And that, but they're a good-looking car, and I think a lot of people buy based on looks. And that the best electric car was Tesla, and they've been making them longer, and that's no surprise. The electric cars are not knocking other people out of the ballpark. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got friends and relatives that have an electric car, and they have to really plan if they're going from DFW area to Lubbock and back. I mean, it's not like there's a place to fill up every 20 miles between Lubbock and DFW. So they have to have it kind of figured out what to do. The Super Bowl yesterday, there was consumption of 1.5 billion with a B chicken wings, and that's 10 million more than they had last year. And it's enough that if you laid them end to end, supposedly, they would stretch from the stadium in Massachusetts, Gillette Stadium, where New England plays, to Lumen Field in Seattle 27 times. It's a lot of chicken wings. And that they'd circle the earth 3 times, and that if you ate one wing every 30 seconds, before you finish that 1.5 billion, it would be the year of 3430. And so, I guess that was the big item, wings. Pizza was a distant second, and burgers. Seattle's known for, throwing salmon and fish like that, but that's not on anyone's Super Bowl menu. And clam chowder for New England. People are not going to say, "Here, get you a beer and some clam chowder."
Right.
That's pretty unusual. It's a lot of people go and watch the Super Bowl, but if you go and watch, you're going to spend thousands of dollars on a ticket. Used to, you get a ticket for less than $100. When the Super Bowl was played in Rice Stadium in Houston, the price was about $35, and times have changed.
They sure have.
Times, big change. Thanks for listening. Don't stumble into chairs and tables that are not there. That's a saying of the day. Avoid making problems out of things that are not problems.